Kurum, newly appointed Subadar of Yalara VI, known to its previous inhabitants as Eden, surveyed his new domain. It was a lush and verdant world with a mild climate and abundant natural resources. Even after paying the tithe to the Imperial Chancellery, there will still be more than enough left over to allow for development of this planet to Imperial standards. He watched the work gangs of his 60 new human slaves as they unloaded the cargo from Kurum's ships. They were remarkably compliant and surrendered without a fight. Kurum was slightly disappointed in that aspect, but it meant there was no need to make repairs to the settlement. It also freed up more of his men to sweep the nearby jungle for more humans and to take a quick survey of the area. So a half-dozen three-man patrols were sent out in a 360-degree arc. There was something weird about this place, though. Their massive concrete walls were useless against his attack from above. So why did they have them? Modern warfare had made such walls obsolete, and they seemed too large for just keeping out animals. Maybe it's because they are so weak. The structures that housed livestock and the 3 communal living quarters were also much stronger than the rest of the buildings. They only had 2 doorways, each heavy sliding steel doors and sliding steel shutters over the windows. They made an excellent prison. So once they'd been looted and checked for weapons, it was decided to lock them in a single building at night. They seemed strangely relieved at this announcement. The humans' compliance also led to the unloading process to be done much quicker than expected. That left him feeling magnanimous when the village leader asked to be allowed to have their supper in their quarters. So he allowed them to lock up their livestock and sent all of the humans to a single one of the quarters. His men would use the other 2 along with other buildings in the compound. After posting guards near the doors of the newly designated slave quarters, setting up sentries and interior patrols, he returned to his orbiting ship. Kurum decided to stay on board his ship until suitable accommodations could be constructed until an interstellar communication system was installed in his HQ, and he enjoyed the view of his new domain. He'd finished his report of the current situation to the Imperial Chancellery and transmitted it before retiring to his bed chambers. He'd almost fallen asleep when the internal comms system buzzed. Annoyed, he sat up and toggled the switch that opened 2-way communication. This better be good or someone will be polishing the outer windows without an enviro suit. He recognized the voice of the ship's captain. "Forgive me for disturbing you, Subadar, but there is an urgent call from the surface. Shall I put it through?" "Yes, Captain," Kurum continued. "Did they say what the trouble was?" "No, sir, just that it was urgent," the captain replied. Grumbling to himself, he toggled the mic. "All right, put them through." A moment later he heard the voice of his second-in-command, Namzu. "Sorry to disturb your rest, Subadar, but I wanted to inform you we lost contact with one of our patrols. I've sent out a squad and redirected several patrols to their last location after an air search failed." "That's an appropriate response, but why not wait until morning to inform me?" Kurum replied, the annoyance clear in his voice. "Ishiadu led the patrol, sir." That made Kurum sit up. "Ishiadu?" "Yes, sir," Namzu replied. "Ishiadu was his best sub-officer, and least likely to fail a check-in. If he did, then something was wrong." "I'll be down in a moment," he replied. It took half a jez to land in the settlement, and he expected updates by the time he left the ship. Namzu met him at the bottom of the ramp to inform him of the current situation. "Subadar Kurum, I regret to report there are no new developments on the missing patrol." At that moment, one of the communication techs ran up to Namzu and upon seeing Kurum stopped and saluted. "Did they find them?" Kurum asked. "No, sir." The tech replied. "Then what brought you at a run to interrupt us?" Kurum asked with a hint of annoyance in his voice. The tech took a step back and took a visible effort to get the courage to speak. "Another patrol has gone missing, sir." "What do you mean missing? Are you sure it's not an issue with their comms?" Namzu interrupted. "It's not their comms, sir. They were part of the search and just disappeared into thin air." He continued. "An immediate search of the area found nothing. We now have 2 patrols missing. What the hell is going on here?" Kurum exclaimed. Turning to the tech. "Have the guards bring the village leader to me immediately," Kurum ordered. The tech took off at a run, and 2 guards approached Kurum, hauling the human between them. Upon reaching the Subadar, they pushed the human to his knees. Kurum looked down at the pitiful being before him. "What is your name, human?" Carl the human replied, "Some of my men have gone missing while exploring the jungle at the base of those hills. Do you know what happened to them?" Kurum demanded. "Reapers." Carl answered. "Reapers? What are those?" Kurum asked, getting frustrated with the human's one-word answers. "Monsters," Carl replied with a single word. At the mention of monsters, Kurum laughed and said, "Superstitious twaddle." He turned to the guards. "Take him back." Turning to Namzu, "Call off the search for the night and we'll pick up at first light." Namzu saluted. "Yes, Subadar." Checking how much time before first light, Kurum decided he'd return to the ship and try to sleep. Kurum was still asleep when Captain informed him of another urgent message from the surface. Saying he wasn't happy at being woken like this would be an understatement. Kurum toggled the switch. "What?" Namzu's voice sounded weird as he spoke. "Forgive me again for interrupting your rest, but it can't wait." "Well, what is it?" Kurum demanded. "We found both of the patrols." Namzu replied, "Excellent, where were they? And what do they have to say for themselves?" Kurum asked. Namzu's voice had that same strange quality as he answered. "Outside the front gate, and they are all dead." Fear, that was what Kurum heard in Namzu's replies. That was something strange to hear from his longtime second-in-command. They'd undertaken many campaigns and fought many battles together. Namzu continued, "You need to come down immediately, sir." "All right, I'm coming down." Kurum replied. Half a jez later, he stepped off the ramp looking for Namzu, but he wasn't there. One of his under-officers was waiting for him. He saluted. "Subadar, Colonel Namzu requests you meet him at the front gate." Kurum noticed the unease in his subordinate's stance, but whether it was addressing his superior or something else, he couldn't tell. As he passed through the village, he noticed his men seemed on edge. They were all combat veterans, and if they were reacting like this, then it must not be good. Upon reaching the front gate, Kurum was greeted by Namzu. His second seemed rattled as he saluted. "So, where are the bodies?" Kurum asked. "We left them where we found them. I wanted you to see them before we moved them." Namzu replied, "Show me," Kurum ordered, and proceeded through the gate. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the bodies. All 6 were shrunken and desiccated, their mouths open in a silent scream. Their eye sockets were empty and looked like they were burned out by the wounds around them. Their armor had puncture marks on their upper arms. Otherwise, it showed no new damage. "By the Emperor!" Kurum swore. "What happened to them?" "Did you catch any of the ones that put the bodies here?" "No, Subadar. The bodies just appeared there while the sentry was at the far end of the wall." Namzu replied. Kurum looked at Namzu. "Just appeared? Like out of thin air?" Asked incredulously, Namzu replied, "No, Subadar. We found some drag marks that led back to the jungle but disappeared after entering it." Kurum thought for a moment before speaking. "Bring the bodies inside and bring that human leader to me," he ordered. "I'll get some answers from him." Despite great reluctance to touch them, the bodies were eventually moved to the village square that was currently occupied by Kurum's shuttle. The guards brought the human to stand before Kurum. "Just what the hell did this to my men?" Kurum raged. The human looked at them, then at Kurum and simply said, "Reapers." "And what are Reapers?" Kurum demanded. Once again, the human uttered one word, "Monsters." Kurum had to fight the urge to kill the human, but he needed to know more. "Tell me about them or I shall start using your people as bait to catch it," Kurum dictated. The thigh. Human sighed and said, "They are some kind of monster native to this world. They feed on the blood, life force, and agony of their victims. They mostly come at night, They don't seem to die unless the head is separated from the body, but they are fast, strong, and cunning." The human continued, "We've never seen a live one up close, and the only dead one was too badly damaged to see much of it." "Is that why you built such high walls?" To keep them out? Namzu asked. The human shook his head in the negative. To keep our people inside, at night. Namzu looked confused at that. Keep them in? The human replied. The Reapers can't leap the wall while carrying a person. They take their victim somewhere the other Reapers can't steal it while it feeds. He continued. Their bite injects them with some kind of sedation paralytic before they grab them. They need them alive when they feed. Alive? Kurum asked. Yes, they feed off the victim's agony as well as the blood and life force. They eat them alive and awake but unable to move. The human explained. So some have survived an attack when the Reaper couldn't jump the wall? Namzu asked. The human just nodded. So, they've seen them? Namzu queried. The human shook his head. Their bite also causes the victim to forget the attack. Do those buildings keep you safe? The one with animals and where we have you now? Namzu asked. The human just nodded again. Anything else, human? No? Kurum asked before turning to the guards. Take him back and let the rest of the humans out to work today. The guards saluted and went to do as instructed. Namzu looked at his superior. Do we keep the men inside the walls? Kurum looked at him like he was a fool. Of course not. We are Imperial soldiers and no one can stand against us. These humans are weak, so of course they think these Reapers are strong. But they are just an animal. Kurum continued. I want 10-man patrols looking for these things. At Namzu's questioning look, he explained, the first 2 patrols weren't aware and got caught by surprise. But now that they know what is out there, they'll have more success. Yes, sir, I'll send them out, Namzu replied, but the look in his eyes said he wasn't 100% convinced. The rest of the day was spent having the humans cutting wood and constructing a tower to place the comms array when it was built. Having found nothing, the patrols began filtering back towards evening, all but one. It finally returned to base, exhausted, and short 4 men. The patrol leader, Sub-Officer Atab, was brought before Kurum and Namzu. Seeing the shape he was in, Namzu had him brought water, which Atab greedily drank. With surprising gentleness, Kurum asked, What happened out there? Where is the rest of your patrol? His voice dull with exhaustion, Atab answered, Something or things took them, Subadar. What do you mean? Something took them? Namzu asked. Atab shook as he replied, We were working through a part of the jungle near those cliffs, pointing in their direction, and we were spread out in a single line. Nobody even heard anything when 2 men, at the end of the line, vanished. Atab shuddered for a minute. They were just gone. Their tracks suddenly stopped. We combed the jungle for them, but I got the feeling of being watched by something evil. Then what happened? Kurum asked. Then another disappeared, but this time we heard his scream and weapons fire, Atab answered. We ran to the spot and found nothing but his rifle. And that is when we heard the laughter. Very quiet but malevolent sounding. So we headed back to base in a fast march. We were maybe halfway back when something took the last man in line. But this time we heard his scream to help him and it continued as he was dragged away. Atab shook again. I'm ashamed to say that we all broke and ran at the same time. We ran, and it was like that laughter followed us. We ran until we collapsed and realized the laughter was gone. That was also when we heard the noise from the base and felt we were safe. Atab finished. Thank you, Sub-Officer. You and your men get something to eat and some rest. Namzu looked at Kurum and both seemed agitated. I want double sentries on the wall and 4 at the gate. If the bodies show up there, maybe we can see these Reapers. Kurum ordered, I want 2-man patrols walking the village and I want them on 4 tal watches. Kurum ordered. Namzu saluted and strode off to carry out his orders. Kurum yelled into the interstellar communication link. I need reinforcements, damn it. By the Emperor, these damn bureaucrats, and they're acting like it's their own funds. Namzu looked at Kurum. Should we go around them and contact the Emperor? It was his decree that we add this world to his domain. Kurum considered it. Not yet. We'll see if High Command can get past those idiots and send reinforcements. Walking out of the communications building, the tension was almost palpable in the air. Over the last 10 rotations, over 24 men had gone missing, Even after he stopped sending out patrols and kept everyone near the base, they still disappeared. Some of them had been sentries on the walls. He was down to just over half of the men he landed with. He'd brought down the ship's security to reinforce the base, leaving just the 10-man crew of the ship. He was really regretting sending the rest of his conquest ships back to base after such an easy takeover. Meanwhile, he kept the humans and his men busy with turning the village into a real base to operate out of. His shuttle had been making several trips a day, bringing supplies down and taking samples and loot back up. Kurum was exhausted and barely stirred when the tech called his name. He hardly slept anymore. Not only had he lost 5 more men, but for the last 8 rotations, the unseen enemy had been coming to the edge of the jungle and made it almost impossible to sleep. They'd call for the guards to join them, give blood-curdling screams, senseless, yelling, roars, whispering, and always that malevolent laughter. The guards would fire into the jungle any time they saw movement, but never hit anything. And he no longer sent out men to investigate for signs they hit something. A sentry had fired into the forest and thought he'd hit one. There was a scream and all the noise stopped, only to continue louder and much angrier. Kurum had sent out a 6-man patrol to follow the blood trail and hopefully find their daytime hiding spot. Only one of the 6 came back, and he reported they'd let him live. They chased after him, and any time he strayed off the path back to base, they herded him back on it. Upon further questioning, he informed them they followed the blood trail to a dead end. It was a trap, and they were caught in it. He'd been knocked into a ravine by something big, so he never saw what happened to his comrades. He just heard their screams and weapons fire, and when he got back to the top, they were gone. So now Kurum hoped for news of reinforcements, but was afraid it was much worse. "What is it?" he asked. The tech replied, "Subadar, I regret to report the front gate has been sabotaged." Kurum sat bolt upright at this news. "What? How?" the tech replied. "When they slid the gate open at first light, it fell off its track inside the wall. We are trying to extract it, but no luck so far." Cursing to himself, he got up and told the tech, "If he doesn't already know, inform Namzu to meet me at the gate." The tech merely replied, "Yes, sir," and cut the connection. He dressed hurriedly and strapped on his sidearm. He'd only recently started wearing it full-time when awake. He'd given orders that his men were to be armed at all times. It was only a matter of moments for him to reach the gate. His second-in-command was waiting for him. "We can't get a hold of it enough to at least pull it closed," Namzu reported. He followed up with the obvious, "We'll never keep them out now. Do we evacuate, or keep trying to block the opening somehow?" Kurum thought and then ordered, "Evacuation is a last resort measure. Take the humans, tear down unnecessary buildings, and construct the sturdiest barricade you can." Namzu looked at the buildings. "I hope we have enough to reach as high as the walls." Some of the humans were sent to cut more trees at the jungle edge, while the rest tore down several buildings for scrap. A pair of screams marked the disappearance of 2 of the humans. After that, both the humans and the guards were brought inside to work on the barricade. They made it as sturdy as they could, but everyone was still nervous. Kurum ordered 1-3 of his men to occupy the fortified quarters and for the humans to be put with their livestock. He also placed several guards in with them to keep them calm. The other 2/3 were spread out on top of the buildings with a clean line of fire at the barricade. Anything that broke through would meet a fusillade of weapons fire. He'd thought about just fording up for the night, but not only did that go against his warrior's code, it also left them trapped in the buildings. He left Namzu in charge for the first part of the night. He'd take the second half of the night. The troopers would be rotated out, so there were always 2/3 on watch. The noises from the jungle began just after dark, right on time. Kurum had just come out to relieve Namzu when something hit the barricade. Hard. That noise instantly brought the troops to high alert. Kurum told Namzu to wake the rest of the men and get them ready. This time, a pair of loud thuds came from the barricade. The calls and laughter sounded closer and closer. They were coming. Soon there was numerous pounding on the barricade. Kurum was tempted to fire through the barricade, but that might just weaken it. But there was a nagging feeling he'd forgotten something. Screams and weapons fire reminded him what it was. The walls. They weren't meant to keep them out, but to keep them from escaping with victims. They were inside the base. His men panicked and began shooting indiscriminately. He watched in horror as the communication device was destroyed. The men lost all discipline and even shot their own comrades. Kurum had to hit the ground to avoid such a fate. Several fires broke out, but he had no idea how. That gave him the first glimpse of his foe, even if just silhouetted against the fires. They were tall, bipedal, and had 4 arms that they sometimes used to move faster. He ran to the building where the rest of his troops were staying when he tripped over the body of one of his soldiers. His throat was ripped open. He began to run when he realized this attack was different. They weren't just going to take a few of his men, they were going to kill them all. He reached the building, entered and slammed the door shut and bolted it. He turned around and then noticed the slaughter. Blood on the walls and floors, several of his men dead, and the other door was slightly opened. He ran to shut the door and tripped over the body of his second-in-command, or at least his head. The firing began to decrease, but he didn't think it was intentional. His men were falling in droves. He remembered the shuttle and made a break for it, yelling for his men to follow him. But no one else made it, and the pilot was not aboard the shuttle. He closed the hatch and entered the cockpit. He used the shuttle's radio to inform the ship's captain he would be using the autopilot to rendezvous with the ship. A noise behind him caused him to turn and find a large beast standing before him. He couldn't take his gaze off those blood-red eyes. After the firing had died down, the door to the livestock pen opened, and several humans exited the building. They carried their former captor's weapons as they did. Carl looked around warily before nodding to his companions. They spread out, looking for surviving guards. Carl ignored a Reaper feeding on a soldier and entered the building that they were kept in before. Carl reached under a bunk built into the wall and pressed a button. A well-hidden trapdoor retracted under the bunk. It opened to reveal numerous weapons, and Carl's people began taking and heading out on pre-assigned assignments. A dozen, headed for the shuttle. It also contained a communication device. He picked up the handheld device and spoke into it. Command, Alpha Base. A voice came over the speaker with a reply. Command, go ahead, Alpha Base. Mission completed. Recall the Reapers once they are done feeding and send in second T. Platoon. Carl replied, understood. The voice replied. While he was on the comms set, one of his men came over and whispered in his ear. Another voice came over the speaker. Well, Captain, how'd it go? The test exceeded our expectations, Colonel. The cranial implants were a success with only negative report. Carl continued. One of my men informed me it looked like we temporarily lost control of one of the Reapers in Barracks 3. At least 10 dead, but we'll need to put the pieces together to be sure. Survivors? The Colonel asked. We took 4, including their commander. The Reapers weren't big on sparing them without direct control of them, Carl replied. The Colonel replied, we bagged about a half-dozen prisoners from their patrols. One group stumbled into a pack of wild Reapers, though. Poor bastards had no chance and no one escaped. What about the ship overhead? The Colonel inquired. I sent a dozen men and the Alpha Reaper up there. Should get word of its capture any time now. Carl answered, excellent caption. We'll interrogate our prisoners and find out who they are and where they came from. Convey my compliments to your men. There will be commendations in their files, R&R, once things are tidied up, and I will personally push for your promotion, Carl. The Colonel finished, taking a more relaxed tone. Thanks, Matt. I'm just glad Deakins and Watts made it to you. I couldn't be all humble for much longer, Carl replied. The Colonel's chuckle came over the speakers before he replied, as soon as the battlefield is ready to be handed over to 2nd Platoon, come on home. I've got 3rd and 5th to escort their Reapers to their pens. Enjoy another amazing story. It was another miserable, hot, and humid day on Tezatov 4, the alien jungle alive with the sounds of strange creatures making dozens of different noises and hundreds of new smells. It might almost be pleasant if they weren't patrolling, for Vrid holdouts left behind when Alliance forces liberated the planet. Who knew how many of those bastards were still running around loose? The flora and fauna made hiking through the jungle bad enough without worrying about rid beams or blades appearing out of the foliage, and that is how the 30 Marines of 3rd Platoon, C Company, 1st Battalion of the 9th Terran Marines found themselves on this nature hike, or more precisely, 29 Marines and a fleet corpsman. Like the corpsmen and medics of the past, Petty Officer First Class David Ho Kwang was simply called Doc. He'd been a corpsman for 5 years now, almost all with 3rd Platoon, and been to hell and back with them. He knew every member of the 3rd Platoon by name and would rush into the fire to get them out. Up ahead was a clearing of knee-high grasses, the perfect spot for an ambush and the reason the patrol was waiting in the brush while a pair of Marines checked it out. They'd just reached the center of the clearing when purple bolts from Vrid energy weapons flew out from the opposite tree line. The pair in the middle went down in the first volley. Someone shouted, "Contact, 300 meters! Return." "Fire!" the Lates yelled, the sound of Terran rifles echoing off every surface. "Sergeant Jansen, take 1st Squad and move left. CPL's marks 3rd Squad to the right and 2nd hold the center with me," the Latian shouted to his subordinates. "Garcia, get that railgun set up, and suppress that tree line." The Lieutenant was so busy setting up a defense that he didn't notice Doc crouched over as he ran to the 2 fallen Marines. After a few bolts got a little close, he dove to the ground, the grass hiding him from the Vrid, and crawled on his belly until he reached his buddies. One of them was ominously still, and rolling him over showed a smocking hole in the center of his chest. The second was moaning and had taken a hit to the left arm, another to the hip, and was bleeding from the head. Doc reached into his med bag and pulled out the little canister of expanding medical foam used to treat wounds from energy weapons. The majority of energy weapon hits would cauterize the tissue of the wound. The foam helped cool the wound and cover it to keep foreign objects out and suppress any bleeding that rough handling might trigger. It also provided pain relief directly to the severed nerve endings. "Ty!" He spoke calmly like this was a training exercise. "Can you hear me, buddy? It's Doc." Ty made a noise that might have been an affirmative. Examination determined. He had a concussion, so Doc quickly and efficiently bandaged his head and strapped his helmet back on him. Doc packed up his gear and reached down to a pocket on his left calf. Out came a coil of the strong cord he carried for various uses. He took an end, ran it through the shoulder straps of the dead Marine's armor, and attached the coil to one of a handful of carabiners on his armor. Putting his face close to Ty's, he said, "I need you to get on my back and I'll get you back with the others." It was a struggle, but Ty managed to climb onto Doc's prone form. Even if the grass hid them from both sides, it didn't mean stray shots from either side couldn't hit them. Getting to his buddies felt like days, but took maybe 15 minutes. As soon as he got to their lines, a couple of Marines took Ty off his back and took him to a spot in the rear. The Lieutenant came at a crouching run. "God damn it, Doc, you're killing me," he yelled into Doc's ear to speak over the sound of combat. "We need you here, and every time you do that takes years off my life. We set up a spot for you in the rear. Now get your ass back there," the Lieutenant said before smiling. "Nice work on getting Ty back." Aye, sir. Thank you, sir," before removing what part of the cord that hadn't spooled out behind him. He handed it to the Lieutenant, and at the questioning look replied, "Cruz didn't make it, but I attached this to his armor. We can pull him out from here." The Lieutenant gave a quick nod of understanding and yelled for a couple of his squad to start reeling him in. Marines left no one behind except as a last resort. Doc made his way back to the wounded and was glad to find only 2 other patients there. Both were minor wounds that just needed dressing, but first he needed to finish stabilizing Ty with an IV and getting him strapped in an evac litter. He got out a bag of saline, tubing, and a catheter. "Hold this," he told one of the walking wounded and handed him the saline bag. He tore open the package for the tubing, set it up, and grabbed the IV needle. After tying a small tourniquet around Ty's bicep, he felt for the vein in his elbow. Finding it, he inserted the needle, checked for good placement, and removed the needle. He attached the tubing to the catheter that was still in the vein and taped it all down. He set the flow rate and nodded to himself. He then turned to the other wounded and dressed their wounds in minutes. They could still fight if needed, but he kept them with him. They'd provide some security and help move less mobile cases. Corpsman, up, came the call from the right flank. Without a second thought, he made his way over to 3rd Squad, CPL. Marks met him as he entered the line. I got 2 down from a grenade. We got them behind that rock. Doc followed where he was pointing. I got it, and started to move away. Thanks, Doc, CPL Marks shouted before returning to the line. When he got to the other side of the rock, he muttered, fuck to himself. A pair of Marines, Rodriguez and Garcia, had stayed with the wounded, trying to keep pressure on the worst of the wounds. Doc nodded to them. Good work, just like I showed you. Keep holding pressure. He made his way over to the 1st Marine and saw dozens of shrapnel holes where the armor was pierced. Double-checking the breastplate showed only the small holes from the shrapnel. Most only needed wound dressing and secured, but there were 3 that weren't going to stop bleeding on their own. He got Rodriguez started on bandaging the simple wounds, and left the bleeders to handle on his own. The 2nd looked to have taken the brunt of the explosion. His torso was a mess, and it looked like parts of his armor had been driven into the wound. This was going to take a bit. Normally, triage meant dealing with the worst case first, but he was going to need some time to handle this. He returned to the 1st patient and pulled out his kit. After inspecting the wounds, he cleaned them out and sprayed in the clotting foam. He finished by stapling the wound closed. Doc looked at Rodriguez. That should hold for now. Bandage them up and get her ready for transport. He turned back to Garcia. I want you to bandage these small wounds, and then I'm going to have something else for you. But before starting, he radioed the Leltown. I need immediate dust off. I have a priority case that needs immediate surgery. The Lelta replied, I'll see what I can do. Status of injured? Doc had started working on the other patient. One priority, I think it's Davison, but he's a mess. 2 urgent, young, and you know about Ty. 2 walking wounded, Chen and Bell. I left them to watch over Ty, and I'm sending Young back with Garcia and Rodriguez. I'm going to need them to help me move Davison. 1 KIA, but I didn't get a chance to see who. He replied, Yiska. The lieutenant replied Doc didn't even respond after he got an IV and intubated Davison. He sent Rodriguez and Garcia to move Young to the rear. He worked as fast as he could with securing the bleeders by cauterizing or sutures. He just finished getting Davison as ready to be moved as he could when the 2 Marines returned. They loaded Davison on the stretcher and just started moving when the call rang out. Corpsman up! Thankfully, firing was beginning to die down, and he reached 1st Squad with no trouble. Of the 3 injured Marines, the worst was a broken leg from a tree coming down. The other 2 were simple energy weapon burns. But what frustrated Doc the most were the 2 still forms on the line. Doc had the 2 walking wounded take the 3rd Marine back to the others. He was so engrossed in his work that he hadn't noticed the absence of weapon fire. The only Virid left on the field were dead or dying, and Marines were remedying the 2nd part for all but a pair of prisoners. Seeing no more wounded, Doc beat feet to his little aid station and checked on his patients. The rest of his patients were stable, but Davison was crashing. He used every trick he knew to keep his heart beating. Lynn, I need that dust off or I'm going to lose Davison, he shouted over comms. I hear you, Doc. Eat a 2 minutes. The next 2 minutes felt like an eternity for Doc. The damn chunks of breastplate in the wound kept him from getting to the heart and lungs. Doc gave a sigh of relief when the assault ship landed in the clearing. He grabbed the nearest Hale Marines and carried Davison to the ship. Any Marine he came across got sent back to evacuate the other wounded. He worked with the medics to get Davison into the trauma bed and hooked into the medical systems there. Once he was sure all his wounded and dead were loaded on the ship, he took a moment to sit on a rock and watch the Vrid prisoners being secured in the ship. The lieutenant approached Doc and said, We're marching back to base, but you look exhausted. Why don't you catch a ride back with our wounded? Doc got up and started to walk to the ship. Let me restock my med kit and I'll be ready to join you. The late shook his head, worried about Doc, but also damn glad to have him with them. The diminished platoon finally reached the base 6 hours later. Despite the near-legendary fitness of Terran Marines, they were dragging ass when they passed the gates. As Sergeant Jansen would later say, they couldn't whip a pair of Durlexian cubs at that point. The arrival of 2 companies from the Cranialian Empire allowed the 3rd platoon to take a 24-hour rest. This was enough to perk up most of the Marines to head into the adjacent settlement where they built the base next to. It lets them take in refugees without compromising base security. Cranialians were one of the most recent and arrogant species to join the Galactic Confederation, and they still thought humans were a joke. Like most species, they assumed all humans were like the traders, mechanics, and shopkeepers that could be found in all of Confederation space. So when 10 of them entered a Lockhart-owned bar that contained a handful of Marines, and Doc sitting in the corner by himself, they didn't show them any respect. They mistook Doc sitting alone as easy prey to humiliate. They didn't know Doc always took his first drink alone while he decompressed from any mission and then joined his buddies. As they confidently strutted over to Doc's table, the bartender let the Marines know what was happening. One of the Cranialians leaned in and said, "Get out of our spot, tiny human, or I will crush you like an egg." The bartender sent his son away and waved the 2 Idric logistic workers to join him at the far end of the bar. As the Cranialian continued to harass Doc, a whistle from behind made them turn around to find 6 Marines standing there and looking very angry. Seeing he outnumbered the Marines, the Cranialian sneered, "Go away, puny humans, or you'll get hurt." In his arrogance, he expected the humans to flee, so he was surprised when they spread out as they moved forward. The Cranialians were smug as they turned to face the Marines, but the look on their faces changed to fear as more Marines began entering the bar. Over 24 more Marines entered the bar, the bartender's son behind them. Humans especially. Marines were extremely popular with the Lacarn locals, so the bartender didn't think twice about sending his son to find more Marines. The Cranialians found themselves surrounded by almost 30 pissed-off Marines. Less than half were from the 3rd platoon. The bartender looked at the 2 Idric and said, "A piece of advice." He was interrupted by the sound of the Cranialians' cries of pain as the Marines began to beat them mercilessly. "Never fuck with the Marines' corpsmen," he finished. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.